Neon is one of the fastest growing brands in the film industry.
And the Oscar goes to Nora Sean Baker!
How did a tiny company that focuses on distributing indie films become one of the dominant tastemakers in Hollywood so quickly? Who are the founders? And why did they create the company? And how is it possible that Neon has won 11 Oscars in just 8 years? I've been researching Neon for 7 months, compiling all of my notes into this video so that I could create the most comprehensive guide I could to understand the company. Before we talk about Neon, we got to talk about Hollywood. Hollywood has always had a tenuous relationship with technological progress. Being founded off a brand new 20th century technology, it owes much of its success to being able to keep up with the rapid pace of innovation since then. From silent films to talkies, from black and white to color, from television through to DVDs, this industry has managed to adapt to technology and make a profit from it. But I think recent years have felt different. Technology is now transforming the way we consume media faster than most companies can keep up with. No one 20 years ago would have been able to predict that we would all be scrolling on our phones through an endless sea of user-generated, algorithmically curated short-form content, or that YouTube would become the largest accessible collection of media ever created in history, distributing videos to more users across the world than any other platform we've ever created. Films just have more competition now than ever before. So how is it that amid all this chaos, a tiny startup has been able to climb to the top of film distribution and create a brand that's growing stronger every year? Even though they might seem identical, Neon and A24 couldn't be more different. I'll get more into that a bit later, but first, all you need to know is these 3 things. Theaters and an earnest love of cinema are core to Neon's thesis.
The real power of this industry, where we cross-pollinate success, is in theater. And the kinds of movies that I wanted to support and be a part of and grow with were the best cinema the world had to offer. 2,
Neon is genre agnostic and shows more international and documentary films than other distributors.
That was super important to me, that we would do movies that were pushing cinema forward and trying to appeal to an under 35 audience. Films that have no aversion to certain genres or foreign language subtitles, whatever.
And 3, Neon distributes films that have become culturally important.
And then the last piece is cultural relevance. Some people dismiss this as social impact. I don't view it that way. I view it as something that it's movies that have purpose, that there's a real intent behind it. The name itself for me, Neon, was an inspiration for the business. Neon represents this very ephemeral gas that when captured inside of this glass tube, it glows.
That was Tom Quinn, the CEO and one of the co-founders of Neon. But before getting into his story, let me tell you about his business partner, Tim League. Deep down, Tim League is just a guy who loves movies. But in 1992, he was working as an engineer at Shell Oil in Bakersfield, California.
You're good in math or you're good in science and then you take a certain career path, puts you into an engineering, comp sci, technical background.
So I got a mechanical engineering degree and an art and art history degree, which shows kind of this internal war that I've always had.
I ended up taking a job with Shell Oil out of college. On my way to work was this 1947 single screen Art Deco theater.
So one day he decides to quit his job and enter the theater business.
Saw a for lease sign. I went ahead and signed a lease to open up the Tejon Theater. And it was a decision of a 23-year-old. I was stupid, completely inexperienced, and way, way, way out of my depth to try to do something like this.
To say that this first enterprise didn't go smoothly would be an extreme understatement.
Eventually my wife, my girlfriend, was working in San Francisco. She was a molecular biology researcher. And so I started this theater, and after a month, it was plain and simple that I was so over my head that I needed help. So I begged her to quit her job and come down. My parents were sort of pissed off about my decision to do what I had done. And her parents were, I think, exponentially pissed off about her decision. So we had both thrown away an expensive Rice University education.
So he and his soon-to-be wife move back home to Texas, and together they start the first Alamo Drafthouse.
This picture was taken during week 1 of construction in 1996 when we were building our first theater on Colorado Street here in town.
It's now grown into one of the largest theater chains in the world because of a genuine, earnest love of cinema. And I don't think it's a coincidence at all that Tim League is who Tom Quinn chose to partner with. Because at the heart of Neon is the belief that movies are meant to be watched in theaters. So let's get into Quinn's story, the man responsible for building Neon into what it is today.
We're not chasing deals, we chase cinema. To me, any year at Neon represents the best cinema the world has to offer, and we want to support it in theater.
I think the cinema that I prefer, that I want to champion, is you got to come out Friday, Saturday night and be a part of it.
Tom Quinn was born in Greenville, North Carolina, but he grew up all across Europe and the Middle East. His dad, who was a basketball coach, trained teams internationally. And so from a young age, Quinn spent time in Dubai, the Netherlands, and Sweden. The first movie he saw was Car Wash when he was 8 years old. And then later in Dubai, he lived in a complex that streamed movies from across the world on a loop of 3 TV channels. He started temping at a bunch of Hollywood studios, then got into the publicity business briefly before finding his footing in acquisitions at Samuel Goldwyn Films. Quinn had built something unique, but he didn't have the independence to go after the movies he really wanted.
I basically spent 7 years at multiple companies and took lessons with me from each and every company. And at which point I left the Weinstein Company. We had created our own boutique label there, Radius. It was time for me to assemble all the things that I believed in. And one of them was the power of cinema. I can't say my timing was great. And I can't say that the business plan overall, it wasn't selling like hotcakes inside of the industry. It took me 1.5 years to raise enough money to launch the company. The original investor in this company was a company called SR Media, Sparkle Roll Media, which, loosely attached to Jackie Chan. And I met them in Toronto. This young woman from Hong Kong named Jo Tam said, "I've heard a lot about you. I'd like to be in business with you." And we bought a movie together that Toronto. It was our first movie, Colossal, starring Anne Hathaway.
Sure.
And 6 weeks later, operating agreement, money in the bank. It was one of the few Chinese deals pre-election that closed. And they were incredible owners. But post-election, they were very amenable to selling their stake. And Dan Freakin came in a year later, just after we bought I, Tonya, which was essentially 6 months into the run of the company. The amount of relationships that I had garnered over the course of my career at Goldwyn, Magnolia, at Radius, that there would be a plethora of filmmakers that I could go to build a slate, both on the nonfiction side, both on the genre side, both on the global side.
One of those relationships was with Bong Joon-ho. And now with Neon, he had the opportunity to get in on the ground floor with Bong's next project.
Bong Joon-ho is someone that I discovered quite by perchance. He was recommended to me as someone that I would probably like his new film, The Host, by Colin Geddes. And I saw it at Director's Fortnight and immediately fell in love with it and struck up a 15-year relationship. So one of the pillars of the Neon philosophy and hope for the company was that we would get to work with Bong Joon-ho, and alas, we did. It didn't matter what he was going to do next. It was going to be a Neon film, and we were going to go for broke and pre-buy it.
But that's a story for just a tiny bit later. First, let me ask you a question. Why are audiences so angry with the movies that Hollywood is releasing lately? There's a common criticism of big mass market movies, that they're bland, that there's way too many sequels, that Hollywood doesn't make original movies anymore, that films nowadays are the result of a bunch of executives in boardrooms making decisions about stories that don't feel real to everyday people. I get it. A lot of people are angry with the current state of the industry, but I think Hollywood has always had a problem of prioritizing profit over art. I mean, of course it has. It's a balancing act, and it's a huge business. But lately, the balance seems to be shifting all the way to one side. Since the 2000s, we've seen the average price of a blockbuster skyrocket, as studios are now starting to put their resources behind an increasingly smaller slate of films. One of the reasons why I think Neon has become successful is because they distribute films that literally no other distributor would. Films that no studio would have the courage to show. One of these films even put them on an FBI watch list. How to Blow Up a Pipeline is a heist movie where a bunch of environmental activists come together to blow up an oil pipeline. I got to watch it at Duke, where one of the professors who was a producer on the film sat down to talk with the director of the Kenan Institute for Ethics. It was a fascinating discussion on climate change and the power that corporations have over our natural environment, and I thought the movie was fun, action-packed, and brought up some really interesting ideas. But I guess US law enforcement agencies thought differently, since they sent out 35 warnings to look for suspicious activity and people who may be inspired by the events of the film. Of course, Neon used the moment for free advertising. Not every film Neon distributes is as political as How to Blow Up a Pipeline, but I think a lot of them at least stand for something and have a real point of view. And to me, that's one of the things that makes going to see a Neon film interesting. Oz Perkins, the director of Longlegs and The Monkey, says that Tom Quinn has a once highly valued human trait that, one might argue by looking around, apparently humans don't need anymore. It's called good taste, and Tom has it in surplus. It's this taste that sets Neon apart in Hollywood. Okay, but so what if Neon has a great slate of movies every year? Art house independent cinema isn't exactly known for being the most lucrative industry in the world. So if you're anything like me, you're probably asking yourself this: how does Neon actually turn a profit? After the success of I, Tonya, Neon was able to find a financial partner in Dan Friedkin, a Texas-based billionaire whose father had created one of the largest distributors for Toyotas in the country. In 2017, Dan Friedkin partnered with Micah Green, who left his job as the CAA Film Finance and Sales Group co-head to create 30 West, a film financing and investment company. Then in 2018, 30 West bought a majority stake in Neon, taking over SR Media's shares. If you listen to any of history's greatest founders, you know that they're all obsessed with cutting costs, and Quinn is no different. We're not in the perception business. We are absolutely 100% in the sustainability business. Everything that we do is calculated at a pretty conservative level. So let's take a look at how he prices out a film that he's thinking about buying.
Bullish for us is honestly, we were projecting a $3 million gross, which any foreign language film that grosses over $1 million is a success. And I know the rest of the industry doesn't see that way, but business I've worked in it is a success, and it's hard to do. And so the idea that we would spend $2 million all in to get to $3 million, it's not going to sustain the company for an entire quarter, but it's going to be a really nice size profit. We don't have the money, right, to compete on a direct advertising level on the award side with the studios or Netflix. But what we do have is we can always be first. We can be first to market. All of these movies, they're all opened on the same weekend, first weekend in October. We are small, nimble. We're only 55 people. We've doubled in size in the last 3 years, but it's still very small. We can make decisions on the fly. We can literally change the entire campaign day to day to day.
How annoyed do you get when everybody fawns over A24 as the modern independent film releasing company?
Of course, not every film is going to make money. That's just not how the film industry works. I've been reading independent feature film production while doing research for this video, and there's something in it that really caught my eye. There's a study that the book references on films that cost more than $4 million. A random slate of 5 films wasn't profitable. A random slate of 10 films wasn't profitable. But a random slate of 25 films was. Why? Because every so often you get a film like Star Wars or Titanic, a film that makes enough money to offset the losses of underperforming films.
In the aggregate, it's unclear where indeed we're going to have our successful hits. And, in some years it's our nonfiction slate that is a big driver. And this year our foreign language portion of the slate was extraordinary.
If you take a look through Neon's slate, you'll find a ton of variety. But there's a boldness to each film that together creates the picture of a brand. And there's a few outliers that have made Neon most of its money, including one that became its largest movie yet at the box office. Did you see Longlegs last summer? A lot of people did. And a huge reason was the insanely effective, cryptic, creepy marketing campaign that they released ahead of the film. Kristen Parks, Neon's chief marketing officer,
told IndieWire that from the jump, we said we needed to respect the horror audience, the genre audience, because they're largely underserved, I think, by distributors and studios. If we treat them with respect, if we talk to them on their terms and on their level and bring them along, they will invest in this film, carry this film, and make it their own.
They had Nicolas Cage in one of the craziest performances of his entire career, and that's saying something. And instead of putting him front and center in the campaign, they kept him in the shadows. They released cryptic teaser trailers on YouTube that fans online spent months piecing together.
And instead of a traditional media buyout, placing ads on television, they did very targeted buys on Hulu and Amazon.
And paid for 4 cheap billboards in Los Angeles.
If you buy a billboard on Sunset Boulevard, it can cost you $250,000. If you buy a board on La Brea, below Olympic, it costs $7,000. So we bought the $7,000 boards.
One of the billboards featured a number that you could call. It went completely viral, generating 1.4 million calls from 68 different countries.
On the way to work every day this month, I've seen a pair of massive billboards. At night, it glows red. One side says, "Jesus saves." The other reads, "The monkey kills."
Neon treats each film as an individual project and gives it a unique distribution, marketing, and publicity strategy. For I, Tonya, they released their first trailer as a red band, even though agents and consulting producers thought that Academy voters would get offended. It ended up winning an Oscar anyways. They put Apollo 11 in IMAX theaters, even though it was a documentary, because of the nature of the film. They've crafted really unique social media campaigns for Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
For Ingrid Goes West, one of Neon's first movies which starred Aubrey Plaza and Elizabeth Olsen, they partnered with Alamo Drafthouse to create a special menu to serve alongside the movie.
Even though Tom Quinn is the CEO of Neon, I can't help but see a bit of League's personality in the out-of-the-box marketing style that Neon likes to do, which is totally in line with the kind of promotions that Alamo Drafthouse used to do.
And I don't know why, but it's Ryan Reynolds, I guess, likes to come into town. So this is, again, a stunt for Ryan Reynolds Buried, for people to volunteer to watch the ultimate Buried experience, where we met them at the theater, blindfolded them, took them in a van out into the country, where we had dug 4 shallow graves and built 4 coffins that had LCD monitors built into the top of them, and then we buried them.
Another reason why both companies have the same kind of attention-grabbing marketing could be that Christian Parks used to run Alamo Drafthouse's marketing before becoming the CMO at Neon. And while we're talking about Alamo Drafthouse, let's talk about the one thing that's absolutely core to both companies. Neon and Alamo Drafthouse both share a deep, earnest love of cinema. It's easy for a love of film to come off as pretentious and exclusionary. You probably know people who judge others for their taste in movies and are obsessed with a certain kind of director. But the way that Neon shows love towards a film doesn't feel like that at all. Why do you love movies? I'll tell you what I think. I think you love movies because you're not just looking for entertainment or a way to pass the time. I think you love movies because they can change who we are as people with storytelling. Or at least that's why I like movies so much. I want to be moved. And I think that's the part of Neon that makes the company so powerful.
Their earnest love of film translates into wanting to show as many people as possible their movies, and to make an appreciation of cinema accessible to everybody. They make enjoying cinema fun, and I think nothing shows this better than the way that they approach awards season.
The Academy Luncheon is an event that serves as a get-together for all of the nominees leading up to the Oscars.
And it's a pivotal moment to make a good impression with Academy voters. By its very nature, it's a star-studded event, and 2024 was no different, with Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone, Billie Eilish, and all the other nominees mingling with producers, filmmakers, and executives. Despite the numerous celebrities in attendance, it was a canine who stole the show completely. Messi, the dog from Anatomy of a Fall. He even made an appearance at the Oscars, where Anatomy of a Fall went on to win for Best Original Screenplay. Awards aren't just a way for Neon to flex its slate though, it's also a fantastic way to develop relationships with important filmmakers, producers, and executives. And it's a great way to extend a theatrical run and bring attention to a film that otherwise might go unnoticed. The Cannes Film Festival in particular has become a cornerstone of Neon's distribution strategy. It's the world's most prestigious film festival, bringing together celebrated filmmakers from around the world, and for the past 5 years, Neon films have won the coveted Palme d'Or, the festival's top prize for the best film in the competition. Anora, the latest film from Sean Baker, is the most recent winner, and it's a top contender for Best Picture this year. But of course, we can't cover Neon's award strategy without mentioning the most pivotal moment in the entire story of the company.
What's been interesting to me is your ability to compete with these major studio Oscar campaigns on these films that are not traditionally or necessarily automatic Best Picture contenders, and you pulled it off with Parasite. What did you spend on that?
What I do know for certain is that from the very beginning, Tom Quinn saw Parasite as a universal film and refused to put it in a box as a foreign language or international film. He saw the heart of the film, and he understood that it was about all of us living in our modern, class-based society. I was always grateful for that.
Neon's first Palme d'Or winner, 4 Oscar wins, and the first international film ever to win Best Picture. I don't think anyone could have predicted what Parasite could have been. Well, maybe anyone except for Tom Quinn.
Bong Joon-ho, for me, was the best director in the world. And he was always dismissed as the best Korean director. And I said, well, that's not how we talk about Guillermo del Toro. It's not how we talk about all these other
Right. Inarritu.
Bong shifted the center of attention. You know, there was some discussion that Bong should speak English because he does. But he said, that's not my native language. I'm speaking to my audience at home, which is the center of my universe.
So Parasite was, first time watching it beginning to end, any frame was in Cannes.
The market screening?
No, the premiere screening.
Me and actors.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was amazing screening.
Amazing screening.
People exploded, laugh and clapping.
Yeah.
In the
It's
middle
intermittent,
of movies. Very strange experience.
I think we're ready to talk about the elephant in the room. Because there's another indie film distribution company with an Oscar for Best Picture under their belt.
It's hard to get upset because I know everybody who works there. We're all old-timey New Yorkers.
But they have a hedge fund behind them. You've got a billionaire behind you. These are not like, podunk outfits operating out of somebody's closet.
We are both New York-centric companies. That's where we started. Most of us, if not all of us, have worked in New York. I spent 20 years there, but now live in LA. We've exchanged a lot of directors. We've picked up movies that they've walked away from and vice versa. But we're not the same. Here's a stark difference. In their first 7 years, they released 3 foreign language films and 3 documentaries. We've released 64, 32 foreign language films and 32 documentaries. We are very different, but are very much on the same trajectory. They won Best Picture and we won Best Picture. But I don't understand their business and their valuations. I'm sure most of the industry doesn't either, but more power to them. A24 is one of the fastest growing brands in film, and they also got their start distributing indie art house films, so it's only natural that Neon constantly gets compared to them. But when we look under the surface, the companies operate very differently. I think the reason why the valuation for A24 is so high, last valued at $3.5 billion with an investment from the VC firm Thrive Capital, is that investors believe long-term that A24 will compete with and start to beat the traditional 5 studios at their own game. Blockbuster movies.
Where there's going to be huge, massive budget films like over $100 million that are blockbusters, that like big bets, like Dune, for example.
Last year's Civil War was a big test for A24. With a budget of $50 million, it's A24's most expensive project, and represents the direction A24 seems to want to go in. Honestly, I think it's a risky gamble for A24, but currently it seems to be paying off. A24 focuses heavily on merchandise, but instead of using traditional distribution methods, they sell directly to consumers through their website. They have a subscription service which comes with a physical newsletter, and now lets you see one A24 movie a month. They were quick to create a podcast, giving their directors and filmmakers a platform to to talk to their wide audience. What they're building is so different from what Neon is building.
The A24 merch is much better. They have like scented
100%.
candles.
Ours is in service of the movie.
Their business models operate at different levels of scale.
They're over 200 people, and their overhead has to be sustained by a different business plan. And when we won Parasite Best Picture, I was asked this question, well, this is going to change your business dramatically. I was like, no, it just validated everything that we want to do.
If you want to learn more about how A24 took over Hollywood, I made a video all about them that you can check out. But one of the outcomes of A24 focusing on a broader audience is that it leaves open a vacuum. A vacuum I think Neon is perfectly positioned to fill.
The race for Best Picture this year really came down to A24 versus Neon, The Brutalist versus Anora. And even though Adrian Brody won the Best Actor award that night for his performance in Brady Corbett's 3.5-hour-long epic, it was Anora that took home the top prize.
So we're all here tonight and watching this broadcast because we love movies. Where did we fall in love with the movies? At the movie theater. Right now, the theater-going experience is under threat. Movie theaters, especially independently owned theaters, are struggling, and it's up to us to support them. Distributors, please focus first and foremost on the theatrical releases of your films. Neon did that for me, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Even though the cost of filmmaking tools have dropped dramatically, it's never been harder to get a movie made.
Like I said at the beginning of this video, Hollywood and the film industry at large is going through a really rough time right now. Although in the past, it's always been able to adapt to technological advancement. When sound and later color became possible, Hollywood studios and filmmakers were at first reluctant to change, but then eventually adopted the technology. When television became popular, Hollywood saw it as an existential threat. Who would go out to see a movie if they could watch a show at home? But eventually, the industry caught on to the idea that TV could actually help market their movies, and that it could be another lucrative way to make money producing scripted content. But technology is now changing at a pace that we've never seen before. In the past year, we've seen Nvidia grow faster than any company in human history by selling the chips that are powering the AI transformation. Platforms like Sora, developed by OpenAI, are now available to the public, and users can create photorealistic videos with simple text prompts. Social media and digital content has grown over the past decade to become one of the dominant forms of entertainment, fueling a creator economy that Goldman Sachs believes will grow to $500 billion in the next few years. Video games exploded in the 2010s, creating a golden era of AAA and indie releases, and mobile gaming became a multi-billion-dollar industry overnight. So with all of this in mind, how can Neon hope to compete? Let's take a step back for a moment, because if you're keeping up with everything that's happening in the world, you might be a little terrified. I know lots of people are scared with the rate that technology is changing everything in our lives, including the media we consume. And there's a genuine fear that in this digital transformation, cinema will die, that younger generations don't have the attention span to sit through a movie, that it's a fading relic from a previous time. I disagree. I don't think cinema will die. Why? Well, I think as long as there are directors that are willing to bare their souls to make great works of art, there will be people like Tom Quinn and Tim League who will show them to people like you and I, people who love going to the theater to see a great movie. I think movies are more powerful than many give them credit for. We're all just out here looking for something real, and I honestly don't think it gets more real than going to the theater and immersing yourself in a story with a community of other people who love movies. Even though Neon is only 7 years old, I think they're a company that's here to stay. And I don't think they're going to try to do exactly what A24 is doing, despite the fact that they're starting to get into producing mid-budget movies. They've recently secured a $200 million credit facility, which basically means that they have a giant credit card they can use to acquire more films, expand their development and production of movies, and double down on their solid distribution business, which is expanding internationally. But I think the core of the company is going to remain the same. The film industry is going through a rough time right now. If you're working in Los Angeles, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think that creative storytelling will continue to live on though. I'm obsessed with the intersection of Hollywood and YouTube, And if you are too, please reach out to me. My email is in the description. But I also think Neon has the power to preserve an art form that's in crisis. Neon is one of those brands that I think has real staying power. It's a company with values that stands apart from so many of our institutions and corporations that are built solely for the purpose of generating cash flow. They're poised to become a global leader in cinema, and in this new world we've created for ourselves, people are lonely and isolated. So we turn, as we have throughout history, to stories to fill that void. Stories can take many shapes and sizes. It could be the story on a billboard, forcing you to think one more time about Coca-Cola. It could be you looking down at your phone at a skit that makes you laugh. A video that lets you focus on something else besides anxiety for a brief few seconds. Or it could be going out with some friends to see a Neon film. Life is just a story we're telling ourselves. And when it ends, just no more story. That's why you have to live fiercely while you can. David Lynch, the legendary film director, passed away in January this year. I've always found his thoughts on technology and film to be fascinating.
Now, if you're playing the movie on a telephone, you will never in a trillion years experience the film. You'll think you have experienced it, but you'll be cheated. You'll be experiencing weakness and extreme putrefaction of a potential experience in another world.
He once said to Thierry Fremont, the director of the Cannes Film Festival, that when cinema dies, France will be the last country where it will breathe. I don't think anyone right now can fully predict the future, as if it's ever really been possible. But I do know this. For as long as Neon exists, the world is safe, knowing that bold, creative, original independent cinema will have a home.
I need to share a very important number.
126844. 12644. This is admission number of Portrait of Radiant Fire.